What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Continuing on with X-Men Disassembled, Uncanny X-Men basically, it's kind of cool. Again, this is like the first story arc, so it's like this big 10-part story arc that kind of kicks off not really the new direction, but kind of like the return of the Uncanny X-Men. And to be honest, again, it's pretty bold to like kick this whole thing off with like a giant event that basically deals with kind of reworking everything. But nonetheless, so what we end up doing here is picking up with the last video. We basically have X-Man in possession of Legion's body. And again, the same thing that we talked about in the last video is that you're talking about one of the most powerful, probably the single most powerful telepath in any reality facing off against, or I guess really in possession of one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, a guy with thousands of personalities, each one having a different power. Now, for those people who would question how powerful Nate Gray is, whether or not he's really the most powerful telepath in any reality, that's been stated multiple times. But one of the things that people really point at as the definitive statement of that is that Nate Gray is basically an alternate reality version of Cable, right? Like in the same way that Strife is like, a future version of Cable, albeit his clone. That when Nate Gray first popped up and when he came to his own reality and eventually met with Madeline Pryor, who was a clone of Jean Grey, when she analyzed Nate Gray, she basically made the statement that, yeah, he's the most powerful telepath that any universe has ever seen. So in the Marvel multiverse, when it comes to a hierarchy of telepaths, he's right up at the top. But him facing off against this small little contingent of the X-Men, there's not a whole lot doing here. It's really him just kind of boasting and bragging, but it's also him becoming a little bit mad with power. And the idea behind this is that he's basically making the case that like, I don't really need anybody in order to achieve my goal anymore. And that's true. It was one thing when Nate Gray just had like vast telepathy and telekinesis at his disposal. It's another that now he has the full totality of all of Legion's abilities. With this kind of power, with the power Legion possesses, or I'm sorry, the power X-Men possesses, what you have to bear in mind is that while all the various abilities that Legion has all stem from different personalities, those personalities are in and of themselves effectively sentient beings, meaning they have their own motivations, their own desires, and by virtue of that, their own minds. And so with X-Man controlling Legion, he's in turn controlling the minds of all those personalities, so he can make all those personalities do anything he wants to do. He's in control right now of countless abilities, from reality warping to, time travel to manipulating people's emotions. If it's a power you can imagine, he has it. And so the X-Men facing off against him is literally hopeless here. And it's one of these things where everything they do, every step they take to try to defeat him is ultimately useless. Nothing really works. And so what you end up getting is Jean Grey kind of sending out this SOS to the entire mutant population around the earth, whatever's left, and then saying anybody who can fight, like, we need you to help us fight. The reality of this is that this is all really just sort of trying to find a way to distract him. And the reason why is because remember, the horsemen of X-Men are all bending to his whim. He's literally controlling them with his mind. And so what they need is the ability to basically distract him. But notice this is when things start to get kind of bonkers, because in this whole conflict, one of the things that happens is he literally says, well then fine, let's just change everything. So what he does is start to sink the entire continent of North America, literally starts to sink it down into the ocean. And so of course, then that basically leads into Beast showing up along with a full contingent of the X-Men. And so what we basically have here is Legion / X-Man facing off against all the mutants in the Marvel Universe. Like every single mutant in the Marvel Universe that can fight is facing off against him here. And none of them stand a chance. Every single one of them are falling to the power of Legion, of X-Man, whatever you want to call them. That's the kind of power we're talking about here. It's like the Marvel Universe versus God. They never really had a chance. And so the only real option they have is to essentially split him. And all that really resides with Storm. And the reason for that is because of how powerful Storm is. She's basically the only real Omega level mutant that we have here that can basically attack X-Man in such a way to where it can offer some measure of a distraction to allow the telepaths in. And that's why you have like Jean Grey and Psylocke, the Stepford Cuckoos, basically the clones of Emma Frost. That's why you have them all there, is because while they could be fighting, they're going to be the means by which that we end up seeing the split between X-Man and Legion. And it happens that way because what ends up going on here is Psylocke shows up essentially with her psychic shield and her psychic sword, and then in turn like grabs Archangel, flies towards Storm and stabs Storm in the head with this psychic dagger. Now that cuts the telepathic connection, and in turn Storm's back to her own accord. Now this basically leads to Storm like freaking out and attacking X-Men and Legion. And again, it's kind of cool. It's kind of Storm's little shiny moment here. She makes a statement, do you think yourself a god? Well, I was a god, but I was a goddess before you were even alive. But again, like she was a goddess in name only. And that's kind of the big difference here. Storm's very, very powerful. She's an Omega level mutant. She can control the elements of any planet that she's on, not just Earth, but she's no no match for X-Man. Instead, she was a distraction. And again, what it does is it allows this tiny sliver of a moment for the telepath to essentially break into his mind. And when they do, it essentially allows them to like split him in half. And again, it's sort of breaking Legion away from X-Man proper, but in the process, X-Man yanks in Jean Grey. Now, the cool thing about this is that it could have easily gone the direction of, well, now he's in control of Jean Grey, but instead it doesn't really go that way. Instead, what we get is this really cool discussion between the two where X-Man really sort of lays out what it is that's actually going on here. And the reality of this is that I really kind of sided with him. And let me know how you guys feel, because I'm curious what your all stance is about this in terms of who you side with, who you think is right. But it's one of these things where Jean Grey says, well, there's always a better way. She's kind of espousing all the stuff about Xavier. Well, there's always a better way, and you can convince people to do the right thing. But X-Man's stance is, but like you've had your chance to do that though. Like you've had your chance to try to fix the world, quote unquote. Humanity has shown itself to be incorrigible. They will always fear you and they will always hate you. And the problem is that whenever somebody comes along with the power to fix things, you get in their way and say, we have to continue on with Xavier's dream. But the idea of X-Man saying, really kind of speaking this is saying, but the dream is nonsense though. Like it's basically, it's a pacifist standing in the face of an army that just refuses to stop fighting. What hope does that pacifist have? It's Tiananmen Square. He's gonna get run over by a tank. And so it's kind of like, okay, we have two options here. You can help me along the way or you can be destroyed. And it's kind of cool because Jean's response is, I don't think you fully understand the totality of what it is that you're doing and creating all this pain and suffering. And so what she does is she literally grabs the mind of X-Man and makes him witness all the things she did as the Dark Phoenix. And when Jean Grey was the Dark Phoenix, she did some pretty heinous things. One of the big things about the Dark Phoenix story is that when she was overcome by emotion and the Dark Phoenix literally flew out into a galaxy and destroyed a star in a localized system, it killed everybody in that solar system. So billions of people's lives were snuffed out by the actions of the Dark Phoenix. And when Jean Grey realized what she'd done, it was a crushing sensation. But it's kind of cool here because X-Man's response is, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like I know exactly the amount of pain and suffering that I'm causing here. I've lived a life of pain and suffering. X-Man was raised in the age of apocalypse. All he'd known was experimentation. All he'd known was genetic modification. All he'd known was basically leaving one universe where there was nothing but pain and suffering to come to another universe where it was the exact same way. It was just more hidden. But his response is like, I'm essentially dying here. All I want to do is fix things. Now, this is where the scenario gets really interesting because the question that we've been having so far is, where in the world did he come from? How did he come back? Because for all intents and purposes, he was basically dead. And so it's like, how did he end up getting back here? Well, what he says is he was resurrected by the life seed. Now, wind the clock back to 2011 during Rick Remender's run on Uncanny X-Force. And one of the things Remender did is he created the death seed and the life seed as these two artifacts that were basically created by the Celestials. And it was sort of a way to kind of back end and offer an explanation to like how Apocalypse was creating horsemen, different things like that. The idea that like, instead of Apocalypse, instead of just kind of being this ambiguous thing of he used celestial technology, he was using the death seed in order to transform individuals into the various horsemen that he used and then augmenting their powers and so on and so forth. The life seed was created as kind of an antithesis to the death seed in the sense that when a person became a horseman, the only way to truly cure them was to use the life seed. The problem is that it would destroy them as they were and recreate them as something new. So it was very similar to like the old Siege Perilous concept from back during the Chris Claremont age of the X-Men. But the fact remains that this is basically what brought him back, that what it did is it resurrected Nate Gray and then amplified his powers. We don't know who did this. We have no idea who it was that did this to him. Presumably we'll find out somewhere along the line, but we have no idea how that happened. But with the various X-Men facing off against the physical form of Nate Gray and then Jean Grey trying to kind of clear things out from the inside, at the end of the day, his response is like, you don't really understand what's going on here. Humanity had its chance to fix itself. Mutants had their chance to basically fix the world, and all of you have squandered your efforts. So how about I just do it for you? And so ultimately what he ends up doing is using the full totality of his power at his disposal and wipes everything away and says the X-Men are gone. Literally eliminates the X-Men from existence. And so it's crazy because essentially because so much of the mutant population is composed of X-Men, a vast majority of the mutant population is now gone. In response to this, humanity didn't really care. They were just kind of like, okay, cool. So we finally got rid of mutants. That's awesome. Because the mutant population is so low now, this vaccine that we had referenced in the very beginning of the story is mass manufactured and sent out, basically meaning that what few X-Men or I guess mutants exist out there now are basically having their powers removed. Now, again, we do have more than 198, but we're talking about maybe a couple thousand, not nearly as many as there were before the whole events of House of M. But again, you're talking about a very small percentage of the population which are mutants, most of which have been wiped out by X-Men, and in turn, the rest are basically being eliminated. But the crazy thing about this is the big takeaway from the story. The crazy thing about this is that going into this event, Age of X, one of the things we end up finding out here is that Cyclops has been resurrected from the dead. That Cyclops Cyclops is back now. And so we have no idea what in the world this means. Like it's cool. But basically it'll more or less see the return of like the X-Men as we knew them before the events of Marvel trying to make the Inhumans cool, which didn't work because the Inhumans have always sucked. But it's interesting here. And I'm really curious to see where we end up going in like the whole Age of X event. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.